Hi, I'm Annie, and I am a wife, a mom, a grandma, and for my day job, I work with leaders on how to cultivate a healthy team. And my favorite team of all time is my family. And I bet it's your favorite team too. Your family is your favorite team. And so it's really interesting though, because it is different for leaders. As leaders, we get to pick our team. But as moms, you know, families are a little bit more interesting, and it's more like what my daughter's preschool teacher used to say to her, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Because that's what families are like. So we have a big job of really cultivating our own healthy team, our favorite team of all time. And that's what I really want to talk about today. How do we nurture our team when they're so different from one another and they're motivated by so many different things? You've probably heard the verse, Proverbs 22:6, that says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And when you hear that verse, you think of things like discipline, you think about building character, you think about telling them about Jesus, and it is all of those things. But I want to add one more thing to your thoughts as you hear that verse. Train up a child in the way that he should go, according to his natural bent or inclination. Train up a child in the way that he should go according to the way that God wired him or her. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because as a Myers-Briggs guru, I think the Myers-Briggs is a great framework for us to notice the preferences of our kids, to notice their natural bent and their natural inclination. And if we can use that tool to understand our kids better, then we can also nurture them in the way that they were wired by God and give them space to become who God wants them to become. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is noticing how our kids are wired and even how we tend to nurture them based on our own wiring. And then I'm going to send you into your small groups with one question to really be able to understand and discover what is that one thing that you might do as a mom to nurture your child according to their natural bent or inclination. And I think it's really important to say here one thing, just one thing. You're moms, you're busy, you're overwhelmed, you have 1,000,001 people telling you how to parent your kids and how to do your family. And if you try and do all the things, you're going to get overwhelmed, you're going to get burnt out, and you're going to feel like a failure. So stop that right now. Because just one thing is all we're going to focus on. Take all the things that you've heard, all the things that you've been told about the way that you should parent, and filter that through the lens of, what is my child's natural bent or inclination? How did God wire them? And what is the one thing that I want to try to be able to nurture them in that way? So that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to do that by talking through 4 questions of things that you can observe in your child that will help you understand what their preferences are. But before we do that, I want to give 2 words of caution. Number 1 is that as we ask these questions, what we're going to be looking at is their behavior. And you know, and I know, that we don't always behave in the same way as what we prefer. We don't always align what we do with what we prefer, and neither do our children. So we're going to be looking at observable behaviors that are not necessarily preferences. So what we want to do is make sure that we give space for our kids to evolve and change over time. We want to notice things, but not label them, and let them become who God wired them to be, and that's really important. The second thing is to notice that our kids are developmentally at one stage, and they are going to move to another stage at another time. And we want to give them room to move and grow. Their preferences will evolve and change over time. We aren't born with super clear preferences. Our personality is not solidified in stone. It does evolve and develop over time. And so we want to give space to our kids to do that, to move and change through the development stages of their life. So those 2 things being said, I want to dive into the 4 questions that we want to be asking ourselves about our kids. So question number 1, what do you notice about their energy? In Myers-Briggs language, this is extroversion and introversion. But where is it that they get energized, and how do they spend their energy? So take a peek at 2 things in your kids. One is, how do they spend their time, and what is their activity level? So when I think about this, it reminds me of my two granddaughters. One is 6 and one is 4. Lila is 6 and Zoe is 4. And when they come over to our house to play, Lila, the 6-year-old, pairs up with my daughter Briella, who's the 9-year-old, and those two buddy up and they terrorize the whole house. They go from room to room playing with this activity and that activity, and they move from one thing to the other. And their amount of time that they spend on each activity is this much before they get bored with that and they move on to the next thing, and they are always together. Wherever one is, the other is there to be found. And we just love sitting around watching them because they're so entertaining. But we'll be sitting there watching them and going, where did Zoe go? We haven't seen her or heard from her for like a half an hour. Where'd she go? And she'll be down on the landing playing with the dollhouse and all by herself, quietly, not making a peep. That's where she gets her energy, is by interacting with a focused activity for a long period of time. She's energized by that. And it takes a lot more energy. She spends her energy when she does some of the social interactions. The older she gets, the more social she's getting. It's interesting how you'll see that evolve over time. So pay attention to that. But it's like, where is your kid getting their energy right now? And where are they spending their energy? And then that can help you shape kind of how you do family time, what activities you want to engage in. Briella and I are like this too. We're like her and Lila. And we can do 10 activities in a day. My husband and my son can join in for about 2 of those with us. And so we've had to adjust and alter our activities. To expect Caleb and Bernard to join Briella and I in all 10 activities all day long would just wipe them out. So being able to know this about not only our kids, but about our families and what our family needs can help us shape our time, can shape our activities, shape the way that we interact, to nurture everybody according to their natural bent and their inclination. Question number 2. What information do they want from you? What are they looking for from you? So in Myers-Briggs language, this is sensing and intuition. What is the kind of information that gets their attention? My son Caleb is now 24, but when he was younger, he would spend all of his time like putting together these wooden train sets, and he would build it from his bedroom, through the kitchen, through the living room, back down the hallway to the bedroom, and being able to see how everything connected together and being able to go step by step to make that train set happen was something that really captivated his attention. He used to put together those honkin' huge Lego sets, you know, where they have 101 steps that you have to follow to put together these Lego sets. That would energize him. All of those steps was information that he needed to interact with the world around him, and he loved those steps. As he got older, again, these preferences develop over time. But when you start seeing consistencies in their behavior, that's where you need to start paying attention. Because even when he got into middle school or high school, what he would choose is sports or games that had clear rules, that had steps that he could follow. And those were the sensing preferences coming out in the kind of information that he wanted in order to be able to interact with the world. All of our kids start with sensing because it's about the 5 senses, what they see, hear, taste, touch, feel. And what are your kids doing when they're young? They're touching everything, they're playing with everything, they're eating everything. And so this is where they start. Every kid starts with sensing. But at some point in their development, you might start seeing a divergence, where like Caleb, some kids will stick more with those sensing traits, and you'll see those sensing behaviors coming forward even more. And others, like my daughter, might move into a different space where the kind of information that matters to them, that catches their attention, looks a little bit different. I remember when my daughter was about 5 years old, we were standing in my driveway, and we have this huge tree right next to our driveway, and at the top of the tree is this huge knot that looks down at us. And my daughter looked up at the knot in that tree, and she said to me, "Mom, that tree has an eye, and it's looking at us." It is very common with those kids with preferences for intuition to start assigning human characteristics to objects. And watch the way that they play pretend. How many human characteristics are they assigning to an object that they're playing with? Is it really out of the box thinking? You know, she assigns a name to every stuffed animal she has, and I think she's got about 100 now, and they all have names. And if you talk to her about her stuffed animals, they all have personality characteristics too. Because she's assigning these not human characteristics to these non-human things. And you'll see that happening. In her art and her creativity, what she's doing is just expressing herself. But art and creativeness is not intuitive over sensing. Pay attention to how they do art. Those who have artistic characteristics that more are sensing will follow more of the artistic rules. They'll notice the rules and they'll appreciate the boundaries of those rules to their art. Those who have an artistic tendency that's more intuitive will spray paint dots all over a piece of paper and then see something in there. Creative, expressive. So pay attention to what information gets their attention. Question number 3. What is important to them? What is their deeper need? So in Myers-Briggs language, this is thinking and feeling, and it's all about the criteria we use to make a decision. If your preference is thinking, it's more objective criteria and results-oriented. If it's feeling, it's a little bit more relational-oriented, relationship-driven criteria. Most of us as adults don't even know the criteria we use when we're making a decision until that decision creates tension in our soul. When we feel that tension, that's when we know what's important to us. Well, the same is true for kids. They're not going to know this preference until they get in tension. So when do you see kids in tension? When they're throwing a temper tantrum, when they're whining, when they're digging in their heels. And that's when you got to pay attention. What is the deeper need that's being expressed here? And I don't know about you, but for me as a mom, the last thing I'm doing when my kid is throwing a temper tantrum or whining or digging their heels in and making my life miserable is noticing what their deeper need is. So this might be one of those preferences where you get through the situation, get on the other side of it, and then pause and ask the question, what was their deeper need in that moment? What was really important to them? And it might be that they were hungry or they didn't have enough sleep, but then start noticing trends over time. If you consistently see a deeper need rising to the surface over time and over again, that's the criteria that you need to nurture and pay attention to and give them space to do that. 4th question, what environment do they need to thrive? So this is judging and perceiving. It might be one of the things that you see later in life. It might not be the first thing that shows up for them. But all of us have a bubble that we put around ourselves that is the way we interact with the world. It's how we want to interact with the world, and we put some rules up to protect ourselves based on our preferences for how we want to interact with the world. Some kids will put up boundaries that need more structure. So my son, for example, really needed more structure. He liked to be planned, and he needed more of an on-ramp to change in his life. So when it came to the Christmas tree, this was really important to him. Taking down the Christmas tree was traumatic for him because it was structure. He'd gotten used to that Christmas tree, and changing that Christmas tree was bursting his bubble. So we'd give him an on-ramp. It's like, okay, in 2 days, we're going to take the Christmas tree down. Oh, tomorrow, we're going to take the Christmas tree down. Oh, today is Christmas tree day. And so by then, he was ready for that change because we'd accommodated the fact that his bubble needed more structure. I don't need to do that with Briella, my daughter, because her bubble is like this. And so when I wake up in the morning and it's time to take the Christmas tree down, it'll be like, I'll take the Christmas tree down. Let's take the Christmas tree down. And she'll be like, oh, okay, may I move that out of my bubble and then take my bubble and move it around this new thing? Because this is how her bubble works. One of the things that you'll notice with kids is their bubble is influenced by outside criteria when they're young. We as parents are setting rules that create that bubble for kids. So you won't always see this in kids because we're telling them how they should create that bubble. And that's important for us as parents. We have to have rules for our kids. They're developmentally not capable of shaping their own bubble. So we need to give them rules. When they go into school, elementary school is going to have a clear set of rules that they're going to have to follow. And they need that because they're interacting with other kids. So this bubble is very influenced by outside criteria. So you may not see this bubble move or shape if you've got a kid that has this kind of a bubble. This perceiving kind of a bubble, a flexible bubble that's open to options and moving and shaping against the world around them. You may not see that until they get into high school and start having more freedom, till they become a young adult and don't have as many external influences shaping that bubble. And so you will see this develop over time. So what I want you to do in your small groups is go through these 4 questions. What are you noticing about your own child or your own children? Personalities will develop over time. But notice where they are at today. Think about that one thing that you might nurture in them with what you're noticing right now. And then I want to also remind you to look for others who can partner with you to do that. If my husband had to be the one meeting my daughter's extroversion preference every single day, he would dry up. So find other people. Use dads, grandparents, community organizations, community programs, church, other moms, friends, family, anybody in your circle that can actually help you meet your child's needs. You are not the only one there to nurture their preferences, but you are the leader of your team. And if you want to cultivate a healthy team, thinking about how you meet their needs according to their natural bent and inclination can be exactly what you need to do to cultivate a healthy family.